Ooh, what's up? Seattle. Is it cold in Seattle? It's cold here. Okay. We are waiting on Rachel. There she is. Sweet. That was easy. Awesome.
It was super easy.
I told you it wasn't that bad. Sometimes
No.
the invites don't go through very well, but we are rocking. Thank you for the congratulations. Appreciate it. Uh, awesome. What are we learning today, Master? Okay. Um, that's funny. So today we have Rachel on, and we are going to talk about, and we may get a little off topic, but we mainly want to talk about novice competitors, or they don't have to be first time people that are a little bit newer in the competitive scene, mistakes, things that people kind of maybe don't realize, maybe go into their prep or show day or prep, or post show.
Yep.
Um, like things that people don't tell you, mistakes that people make, et cetera, et cetera. Because you had, well, first off, before we do that, introduce yourself, because I mean, some of the people will be my crowd as well.
So I actually am a coach. I train competitors, lifestyle people. I also own a gym in Smyrna, Georgia, so I do in-person training as well there. Um, we've had the gym for about 12 years, and then I've been doing the online coaching thing. This is my third year doing it. So yeah,
Cool. And you are an IFBB pro as well.
yes, yeah, I'm an IFBB
Cool.
figure pro.
When did you turn pro?
Last year at Junior Nationals.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, yeah.
You're not cool, sweet. So, so as far as competitors go, you said it's a little hard to hear you. Maybe move. I don't know if that's a mic. I can hear you good, honestly. Can everyone hear Rachel all right? I can hear you fine. Turn your
Hello.
volume up.
Yeah, Michelle.
Yeah, there you go. The best gym, Titans. Yeah, I've been there. I
Yeah,
remember.
yeah, you're there. Yeah.
I trained there. I remember distinctly because Trey Brewer was at the front desk.
Yes.
Can you guys, okay, who cannot hear Rachel? Because I can hear you really good. Little low. Uh, let's see. Let's see
Let me
if
try
anyone
something.
else comes in. Check. Testing.
Is
Good.
that better?
Oh, that's way louder.
Is it? Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah, that's way louder. I think we're good. Can you guys hear a little better now? Perfect. Cool. Yeah, I think maybe that was it. Yeah. Okay, cool. So, um, as far as competitors go, you are working with like more novice people generally?
So I work the people that normally come to me are either people who are thinking about competing, who have never competed before, or really they were already with me just doing the lifestyle training and they're like, hey, I think I'm this, let's talk about doing this. Um, or it's that I usually get people who have been with other coaches before, and now they either have some kind of hormone issue or they need labs checked, and the last coach didn't do that. So those are usually the main things that I get as far as.
Perfect. So we and honestly, like a lot of those people that are working through functional health probably were competitors or want to compete later anyhow. So it's kind of, and I feel like I get even a lot of the Gen Pop people I get at some point, they're eventually like, hey, do you think I could compete? You know
Well,
what I
what
mean?
now is all that is so tied together. So you know, that's now a functional health person, you're right, was a competitor now, or, vice versa. They did the functional health route, they feel like they're healthy, and now they want to compete. I feel like competing has gotten so popular now, that, 8 out of 10, you know, people that want to or are interested in doing it.
Sure, absolutely. So let's talk about person comes in, let's talk about what that initial conversation might look like, because I think there's a few things, at least there's a lot of things, but let's assume that they are like healthy enough, like they're in a position where you either work with them or they're in a good spot where they could prep, right? Um, I know for me, one of the things that's difficult is when they're like, "Hey, there's this show in 16 weeks," and they want to sign up like on that day and start. Do you get a lot of that?
Yeah, I get a lot of people are saying, "Hey, I picked out a show. It's, 12 weeks away. I really want to do the show. It's in my hometown,"
Right.
or whatever reason. And, you know, probably this past year, I'm trying to lean towards chasing the physique at the stage. So once you're ready, once you're about 4 to 6 weeks out, cool, let's look at a show. Let's look at a show, and
Yep.
then go from there versus having this concrete date in your mind where
Right.
you're dressed to hit it. You may not even hit it. It is what it is. Things happen. It's really stressful. I find when you put that in mind.
Yeah, because I mean, in an ideal world, it's, what is it now, December? They come to us in January and they're like, "Hey, I'd like to compete maybe like next spring."
Yep.
You're like, "Oh, sweet," right? Because
Yeah.
you get some time to work with them and go, figure out what the pitfalls are, learn their body, so on and so forth. I love that you do that as far as dates go, because that's one of the first things I talk about. If you're a national level competitor or a pro, like you have to kind of map things out a little bit differently because you're more limited on dates and things. But for, local and regional competitors, especially first timers, like ultimately the goal is just to do well and present and learn from the process. So there's MP, especially, if you're an NPC, I mean, there's shows every weekend all over the place
Yeah.
and normally within regions, because I mean, I'm in a different like region than you, but you're going to find something within like a 2 to 3 hour radius in like a 3 month time span. You know
Yes.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead.
No. So yeah. So there's a show, especially in Georgia. I feel like there's one every month for the most part. So, um,
Yep.
and you're a first time competitor. There's so many unknowns just for you as far as experience. Like, I'll help you and guide you along the way, but you've never experienced a prep before. So I
Right.
really, by taking out of some of the stressors and the questions, you can really focus on your prep and not necessarily, oh my God, I have to make this in 16 weeks. There's no other option.
Right. Yeah. So I'm like, don't buy the ticket. Do not purchase the entry fee. Do not book the tan. Like
Yeah.
just relax. And for some of these people, well, probably, I mean, for all of them really, especially if it's their first prep, they've never even been this lean before. So they don't they don't really know. Maybe they've been lean-ish, right? But there comes a point where like everything changes psychologically and physiologically. Like you're going to feel a lot of things that you've just never felt,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, and they don't really realize that when they come in.
Right. And they don't really know what they're looking for, how they should look, or um, when they're ready, or when they're ready to go and things like that. So, like I said,
Right.
it's just a time for the new competitor.
Yeah. And of course, as you know, the look or weight or whatever, especially if they're a guy and they're thinking like a weight, like women, of course, it is kind of arbitrary, but it's probably going to be a lot less than what they think, at least if they want to like actually be in shape, because they said, "Hey, I went to whatever show with my friend and I watched," and I said, "That's great. For one, you can kind of see how it runs, but secondly, just because you're a first time competitor doesn't mean that we can't just like go win the damn show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I still am going to want you to show up and be ready to compete, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
that's
when
important
obviously the whole, I want you to win. I want you to look good. I want you to go on stage and be competitive. So, it's just so much easier when we're focusing on that aspect versus hitting that, 16 out stage or whatever. It's just, it makes my job easier for sure.
for sure. Let's talk about women a little bit. So with women, um, obviously there's some other, and I mean with men too, but there's other things that are going to go into it. So maybe presentation, choosing like, you know, suits, like stuff like that, that they, things that maybe issues that you see with people and just generally not being prepared. I think we may have talked about this, like not like, showing up at the show, like not having things you should have and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
So the first thing I like to go over is like presentation and posing. I coach, so I will usually refer someone to a posing coach um, that I trust and that I've worked with before, so they can help them with. I've noticed definitely there was a show this past weekend, um, a lot of fantastic physiques, but when it came down to posing and comparison, it was just not even the people who didn't look as good blew them away.
Right.
So definitely something I try to push on people early and like, hey, you need to practice. This is going to be new. You need to get your heels and practice walking in them and things like that.
Right, for sure. I know I've had been working with Kenny, my whole prep
Yeah.
Wallach, and like because I've known Kenny forever, and I've prepped a bunch of times, but I'm going to tell you that I learned things still because your physique changes and stuff over the years, and he still was tweaking things and still making things better, and he was like hammering me the whole prep, like you can
Yeah.
do better, and I'm like going into it, I'm like, my posing's already pretty good. I get compliments on it, whatever. And he's like, no, I mean, we can be that much better. So I think that that's huge. So women obviously, and I'm sure you would agree with this. One of the things with women is that physically, when they're good, there's less characteristics that differentiate them like
Hmm.
from another competitor. So presentation is huge because let's say it is a show where there's a few girls, that are pretty solid and they're all kind of close. Um, you have to get a look, right? Like they have to have a reason to look at you.
Yeah. And you're right. That's what separates, a competitor from a great competitor. And really, as you get to like a national level show or, higher up, everyone's going to look good at that point. So
Sure.
on your, posing and presentation, that's what's going to set you apart, from everyone else. And that can even tie into suit selection and the cut of your suit. A lot of times, especially for figure, people don't know to pull their sides up to where their belly button meets. If you don't
Right.
do that, it can look black like that. So, again, you can have a really great physique, but if you're not showing it off or presenting it in a flattering way, it's not gonna help you. You'll probably lose points off that.
100%. And also to that point, suits and all of these things are expensive as well.
Yeah.
So there's another, you know, cost. Like that's another thing that people maybe don't understand is if you're 16 weeks out and you're going to pay for and of course like the higher up you go nationals pro like it's all the money just goes way up
Yeah,
but
exactly. Yeah.
I tell people a lot especially that women that need XYZ. I'm like, get a little bit of each thing kind of like as you go on in the prep if you're on a budget. That way you're not entering the show at 4 weeks out and having to buy your suit and having to pay for your hair and your makeup and your tan and all this because now you're stressed out because you just spent $3,000.
Yes. And really what I found, when you're a new competitor, you've never competed before, renting your suit is a really good option, because really at the end of the day, you don't know if you're going to want to do this ever again. This may
Sure.
be something for you. You're like, hey, glad I tried it. But at least that's going to save you some money in the beginning, till you figure out kind of, what your next move is.
Yeah. And I would say that it's normally good. Convenience and like having the best things is normally the best policy. So what I mean by that is like if it costs you a little more to get the good suit, if it costs you a little more to get the good posing coach, if it costs you a little more to like buy the show tan, don't try to tan yourself, like stupid shit like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I see people do that. They're like, well, because it was, $150 or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but you just lost because of that, So let's talk about tanning a little bit. So with tanning, I had a lot of issues with that, with just like the pH of my skin and like ethnicity, wise. I just never sat on me good, right? So I need a lot of coats and stuff and whatever. Um, so with tanning, are there any suggestions that you, because sometimes the companies give you suggestions, but is there anything that you generally suggest to like a new person that's maybe never done it before?
So you definitely want to exfoliate. I would say at least a week out, and you want to use something that doesn't have a lot of oils in it, and really focus on like your elbows, your knees, your ankles, drier parts of your body. Also, washing with baking soda helps with the pH as well. The main thing is the day of the tan, you don't want to wear deodorant, you don't want any lotions, perfumes, or oils on your skin, because all that's going to affect the evenness of your tan.
Yep.
It's the whole deodorant thing, because usually your turn just on your arm.
Yeah, you get the old green going on. Yeah. So I know for this show, my tan was was really really good, um, but yeah, the exfoliating is huge. Using like fragrance free type of women. Women I tend to have more problems with because they use a lot more cosmetics and things than
Yep.
men, right? So they're like scented fucking, like boom, 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 boom. I'm like, okay, but all of that is going to A, create a barrier on your skin.
Yep.
B, it's going to change the pH of your skin totally. And a lot of those things don't necessarily are, clear off your skin for a few days. So you can't just cake all of that shit on up till Thursday and then
Right.
expect to be good for your Friday tan.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And with men, go ahead.
And I was gonna say, after your tan, you always want to choose loose fitting clothing, nothing red or blue, so black or gray. And then, yeah, that just helps obviously, creasing the tan like that too.
100%. Here is a really good question. I really like this question. All right. Here's one that probably a lot of people don't expect. Could you talk about the impact of competing can have on relationships, body image, and food focus? Oh,
Cool.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a great question, actually, for people that have not done it. Um, I can tell you, I'll tell you from my personal experience is I know for me, it I've gotten I've gotten a lot better at it as far as like, I just don't I know what to expect, so it doesn't really impact my day to day as much, you know. Um, but with that being said, don't expect to get super lean and feel normal. Like there's going to be things that happen that are inevitable if you get lean enough. Like it happens to everyone. So um, you'll find that you probably maybe are a little more apathetic or something. Like as far as you just don't you know things that they said relationships. So towards your partner,
Hmm.
maybe. Um, However, the one thing that I try to tell people, especially when they're newer, is probably the biggest mistake that you can make is um, that victim mentality. When you do start to feel when you do start to feel that way because it's new, you can't start feeling sorry for yourself and you can't start, you know, becoming the victim because now you've gave in and you're going to start projecting on people and
Yeah.
you're going to start projecting on, you know, whatever, like you understand. I mean, in the food's the same thing. You're prepping, okay? Like uh you don't need a stash of food in your bag for after the show. You don't need to worry about how many cupcakes they have backstage. You don't need to worry about what other people are doing. You don't need to worry about any of these things because ultimately your post show is already going to be difficult enough
Yeah.
as it is. So what are some things that maybe you've seen that you knew were going to happen, but they maybe didn't quite acknowledge were going to happen?
So let's start with, I guess we could do like the post show thing. Um, you
Yeah,
know,
100%.
I definitely, and really ties into relationship with food. So I never had a good relationship with food. And I didn't know it was a bad relationship with food until I kind of had a good relationship with food, if that makes sense. So I
Sure, sure,
didn't
sure.
I was
Yeah,
out
yeah.
of it. So, was that person who would order cookies 8 weeks out. I would have a freezer full of like hundreds of cookies and cupcakes
Yep.
and a bunch of shit in there. And as I got closer to the show, um, it was really hard to not eat them. And I did, they were in there, I ate them. And so, but
Right.
what that for me was going after the show was a shit show. It was almost like it was just a downward spiral or like a slope where I knew they were in there. I knew I could have it and I couldn't stop. So really for me, post show issues usually started, I would say 4 to 6 weeks out because I was tired, I was hungry, I was over dieting. Um, and so, when people tell me, oh, I just got the newest cookie from whoever, I'm like, hey, there's plenty of time to do that after the show. And, let's just focus on, getting the last 4 weeks out and finishing strong and things like that.
Right.
Um, yeah. And then really when it comes to the relationship part of it, my husband used to compete. So he kind of already, it's not a new thing for him. So I really kind of tell people, if you're going to start competing, you have to be aware that it can be a selfish sport. It can be hard at times. Let's say if you have friends and you go out all the time and you're drinking, when you're in prep, you're not able to do some of those things. So it's really kind of being able to focus on what your goals are and not let anything else get in the way of it.
Yeah. And I think a really good way to do that is you have to establish the routine before the prep
Yep.
starts. Okay. Like here's the thing. I don't I find that people that have experience in terms of like routine, right, and foundation have less of an issue because the thing about prep is the only thing that really changes in prep until of course you're gonna the fatigue and stuff later on, but especially like for the vast majority of the prep is you're eating a different amount of food and your activity level changes. But really, largely, you should be doing the same things that you were already doing,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And you need to apply that post show as well because post show is it's not like you just finish and then all of a sudden, they're like, hey, aren't you glad you're done with prep? I'm like, yeah, but now you have 6 months to get back to get your energy levels back and your hormones and blah, blah, blah. And a great way to mitigate a lot of that is have experienced it. So like one of the things about like starting with coaches prior is I love when I have people that can go through a phase of a surplus and a deficit. Like we don't need to get prep lean, right? But
Right.
they can feel what it's like to lose body fat, get hungry, right?
Mhm.
Get hungry, like feel all these things and then come out of it and be okay with it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's a good way to like softly introduce that process because, like you said, a lot of those issues post shows they start well before you get to
Yes.
that point. Like last week, no, it wasn't last weekend, was it 2 weeks ago? I did the show, might have been, but anyhow, so I'm backstage, right, and they had the spread, right, the cookies and the cakes, and it was. I'm gonna tell you what, it was a spread, and we were in Chicago, so they had like deep dish and all that like shit, like bringing in
Yeah.
box of pizza and stuff, and there was a gal close to me, sitting close to me, and I'm getting ready to go out for my night routine. And she's over there picking away at the table. And she's like, man, I'm really going to do better this time post show. I'm not going to binge. I'm going to stay leaner. And I said, I just want to say, honey, it's over. Like, it's done. Like, you already started. Like, this is it, you know, because you're already, like, you're already at the table. You
Right.
know what I
Exactly.
mean? So that's why again that's routine is so important. And like you said, some people are never going to want to do it again, and that's fine. Like it's not for everyone. But in order to be a bodybuilder, it's a lifestyle, and you have to be in that routine because the only thing that really changes for me post show is I'll have a meal on the weekends. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll eat more food, obviously, like my calories and all those things are going to go up. I'm going to do less cardio, all blah, 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 whatever, right? But um, if I'm going into a show, my sleep patterns suck. I'm used to binge drinking every Saturday. I don't have any routine, blah, blah, blah. Then it's going to be that prep is just going to basically be like the person that just barely makes it through their week of work so they can party all weekend.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's exactly what's going to happen is because as soon as that show's over and you take that first bite, when you go to that restaurant or you go to that bakery or wherever you go and you take that first bite, it's over. It's done. It's done. I mean, you're going to come to myself or Rachel or someone, you know, whatever, 3 months after the show, whatever it might be, and you're going to have probably overshot the weight that you even started the prep with, and your hormones have not recovered. Your hunger is still ravenous. You've gained a bunch of body fat. You're miserable. You're bloated. You have SIBO. You got all these things, and you're like, hey, now I need to lose weight
Yep.
again. And so what do? They're like, should I just do another prep? Right?
Yeah.
You know?
That's yeah. Like, hey,
It's like,
or I get some of the fat off. What do I need to do? Unfortunately, once you went crazy after your show, you can't do that. You really kind of have to sit at the body fat level you're at until you're to, a mini cut later on once hormones digestion are back to normal. And really, I was one of those people that gained 30 pounds after my first show. So I know what not to do. And my goal for first time is to help them not do it because it's not fun. You don't feel good. And really, if you're going to, you should really, it's like, a lifestyle, kind of like what you said.
and men, it's funny with men because the same exact thing happens with men, but men generally just play it off as like, oh, I'm bulking. You know
Yes.
what I mean? Like from a body image standpoint, like they justify it a little bit differently. You know what I mean? So, but it's the same thing. It's really not any different. And they inevitably their off season, the first half of their entire off season's already junk. It's ruined,
Right.
and we got to restart.
Yeah.
Basically. So it's super important. And so, is there a point where you because I know I'm always careful with this because I don't want to like distract the client from what we're trying to do, which is the prep. But is there a point like close to the show where you maybe like mention the post show period?
So usually, during peak week, I give them like a tentative plan of how things are going to go. And then I also talk about the day after the show and kind of what
Right.
would happen. After the show, I'm usually texting them kind of, hey, for tomorrow, if it's a Sunday usually. So Sunday, let's do this. Monday, go ahead and check in. So at least there's still kind of parameters on what's going to happen that following day. And granted, it's just a day at in the scheme of things, but at least they have a plan and it's not like, okay, I'm not to do anything. let's go eat. Um,
Right.
Always try to give as much guidance as I can for that next day, and then starting them, on the right foot that Monday or whenever their check-in day is.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think having that structure is important. I'm always encouraging people to not just hire me for prep, but like at the very least, like stay with me
Yeah.
for at least a period of time,
Yep.
you know? Um, Another thing that I will do with people is um, I will kind of do what you said, but also just talk to them about the importance of like easing back into this process. So I'll give you an example. Let's say they're eating, it's a smaller female, their calories get pretty low, they
Mhm.
doing a lot of activity, whatever. Something that people forget is that when we're looking at calorie balance, yes, we're going to add food back in, of course, post show. But if we were doing XYZ cardio and then we add the food and drop all of that out, now we've just went net calories just went
Yep.
right.
Yep.
So like, things like that people don't consider is if you are have someone that has to kind of push yourself and do those things, like there's going to be a process after the show where we kind of have to like ease people back out of that maybe, and that's like fat loss supplementation if they're using those things, like all of those things. So you can't just be like, all right, we're done, no more cardio,
Yep.
whatever, blah 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 blah. How about let's touch on training a little bit,
Mhm.
perhaps, um, because it's kind of a similar thing as I think people are. If you really are really truly show lean, you're not going to come out on Monday after your Saturday show and probably be ready to do what you did 20 weeks out.
Yep. So a
Um, Go ahead.
so, um, I really try to focus on recovery and getting rid of some of the stressors from just being in a caloric deficit, or if you're a person that cardio was pretty high towards the end. So really after the show, if they were doing a lot of hit or any other high intensity cardio, I try to switch it to less, not necessarily switch the duration, but cut down on some of the stressors
Right,
from
right.
and really a lot of that goes for training. Initially, we may do, 5 days a week and then drop down to 4, just to really focus on recovery and removing some of the stressors from everything.
Yeah, yeah. Because I always tell people they maybe they've know someone that's competed or whatever, and they talk about like this the rebound period, or right post show. I said the best way to have a great rebound period is to de-stress your body as quickly as you possibly can, because the last thing you want to do is come out of it and think that you are all of a sudden going to magically take advantage of this period where everything's super down regulated, and then 4 weeks post show you're just in an even worse position than you were
Yeah.
prior. Um, this is really important. Someone asked another good question here, actually. So this is from Michelle Barnes. Is Michelle Barnes your client?
She's my friend. Yeah. She's a,
Oh,
she's a,
cool.
yeah.
Awesome. So she asks, because she asked us the first question too. She goes, "Can you cover seeing your body change from being super lean after a show and how mentally difficult that can be?" Great
Um,
question.
yeah. So, obviously when you're stage lean, that's not sustainable, long term. So, going back to, post show, if you're reverse dieting, slowly adding calories back in, slowly reducing stressors, um, you know, the changes that you're going to see in your body are not going to be, I would say, as extreme of like as putting on a shit ton of fat. If you're tapering off supplements, if you're, have a plan to follow and you're not just going balls to the wall eating, 1,000 calorie surplus, what you'll notice is that, like I said, the changes won't be as extreme and you won't be putting on a ton of body fat there. Um,
Right.
yeah. So where a lot of people, especially females, I think get in their head about is wanting to stay lean or stay year round. Um,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's not healthy usually, and it's not sustainable depending on how low your body fat goes.
Yeah, there's the difficulty is that you've now experienced something that you've never experienced before, and your benchmark is way higher. You know, you're like, because for a lot of these people, men and women, like maybe this is the first time that they've had like full visible abs. You know what
Yep.
I mean?
Yep.
Like they maybe have never even had that. Or for women, they have, you know, they have some, their like glutes are boxed out. You know what I mean? They're
Yep.
like, look at my butt, right? And what I tell them is, um, we obviously don't want to like again, we don't want to like overshoot where you were prior to your prep, but we have to look at like what was a sustainable body composition for you where you were healthy prior. And
Yep.
that's another reason to work with a coach and go through phases of surplus and deficit and things before you prep so you kind of know that. You know, one of the things that always kind of makes me cringe is the people that have that do like large weight loss, you know what I mean? Like maybe they're
Yep.
really overweight, like 80, 100 pounds overweight, and then they lose a bunch of weight and they're like, man, I've lost 60 pounds and they can't lose anymore. So like I'm gonna prep, right?
Yep.
And then so they continue it with something extreme prep, and then they get really lean. And now those people have such a difficult time because they never want to be fat again,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because they were fat. Like they're like, why would I want to do that again? So now it's so difficult for them to allow any of that body fat regain to come back. I see this with men too. Like it's the same. I mean, men and women. Um, that's why I tell people, I'm like, I would definitely not encourage you to do an extreme weight loss like that and go straight into a contest prep,
Yeah.
you know? Um, but yeah, it's again, like I think that it's irresponsible of a coach not to kind of establish what a realistic um sustainable point is for these women. And I
Mhm.
don't think that a lot, here's the thing, like, I don't think a lot of them know. I don't think they really they just don't know because they see whoever on Instagram or they see like IFBB Pro that still has abs 6 months after her show and her off season. And they don't realize that, well, well, there could be a few things. Either A, she has good genetics. B, she executed her post show really, really well. Or C, you know, she's done this a lot of times and her ability to maintain that is somewhat improved over her first show because it's pretty rare that someone does that first show and like nails that post show. Like
Yeah.
it
Sure.
almost never happens.
Yeah. I've never experienced that with anyone that I've worked with. And really, what's helped for me is a lot of women face a scale weight. So week of the show they were 110 pounds, and they are so focused on that 110 pounds because they're equating their scale weight with how they look, and that's not always what it works out to. So if we're doing a cut, and then a reverse, and then we go into prep, each time your body composition can look different. Your scale weight's going to be different no matter what, but we'll be able to at least put on some muscle, move your daily expenditure up, things like that. So, I try to get people off the scale weight and focus on pictures, measurements, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and for some like I kind of have to remove some of those things as far as like like looking. I don't because you're used to weighing yourself every single day in prep and blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? So it's like, and also you have to think, what is your goal after the show? Like if competing is something that you enjoy and you want to improve potentially, um, again, women seem to have a harder time with this than men because women generally, for one, it's just harder for them to gain muscle,
Yep.
first off, genetically and hormonally, right? And secondly, it takes a longer time for them to recover a lot. And then also, you're definitely not going to be improving if you're trying to maintain 10 pounds over your stage weight for whatever amount of time. So it's a super important discussion. Michelle asked us another really good one. Michelle's crushing it over here. So she said, can you discuss how to handle not doing as well as you expected?
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think?
So here's the thing. You never know every time, obviously going to the stage, you never know who's going to show up and you never know who you're going to go up against. So I always try to tell people and recommend focusing on you and your own milestones and what you look like and things like that. Um, because a lot of times you can look fantastic and then once you're being compared to other people or, what the judges want specifically, you know, so I think that by bring. And, if you've competed before, progressing from each show and, after getting the judges' feedback, if they're like, hey, you need to bring up your quads and your back, doing those improvements each show, it's just focusing on you and your body.
Yeah, 100%. You have to, again, like especially if competing is something you want to continue to do, it's going to be important because you might you might get your ass kicked,
Yeah,
you know.
and that's okay.
Good. And that's fine. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it is fine. It doesn't. I think again, and social media is so bad for this too because now they can just scour social media, like find all these other people that are doing their show and like look and see what they look like, and then they look at themselves and they don't look the same or whatever, even though this person's like, you know, got the good lighting or fucking anything. You know what I mean? Like it can be anything. So
And that's
yeah.
really made a good point about social media. I had a client before that was set to do a show, and she started following people that were doing the show also. They were looking leaner than her, more muscular, and she's like, "Hey, I'm not going to do the show because so and so is." And I'm like, "It's social media. You don't know what they're going to look like in person, or you don't know what they can look like on show day. Whether they could be super stressed out and not do well. You have to focus on you and what you're bringing to the stage, and that's the only thing you can control. You can't control who shows up or anything else outside of that."
100% agree. Yep. Somebody asked two questions here. First one, how do you feel about all these body scans like DEXA? I don't know. I mean, do you ever use any type of body scans or body fat testing?
So we have an InBody at the gym for people to use. And what is helpful with that is I don't necessarily look at the the body fat percentage, for example, as being 100% accurate or the end all be all of what your actual body fat is. What it's good for is looking at the trend. So if we're saying it, going down each week, or if you keep it goes up, then I think it's a good tool as far as measuring progress because you're looking at the trend, not necessarily focusing on that number.
Right, 100%. Yeah, I think it's definitely not like it's definitely doesn't really mean anything when you get in front of the judges, but as far as having it's data, you know what I mean? Like it's like putting a picture side by side and just analyzing it and having data. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. And all tools are useful as long as you understand where they fit in, you know,
Yeah.
for sure. Got one more here. So multiple close and timing. So they're basically asking like I'm assuming they're asking like for newer competitors doing multiple shows back to back, or is that something that you should only just focus on one for your first time around?
So my opinion is I think it kind of depends on the person and what the outcome was of that first initial show. So if you're going to do your first show and the feedback, know, the the judges is you need to have more muscle density or you need to gain muscle. At that point, if you're doing another show in 2 weeks, you're not going to be able to put on muscle density in the 2 weeks.
Right.
So that's the first thing I would look at is, to me, is kind of, what that outcome was of the first show. Now, if they're like, hey, you need to come in a little bit leaner, then, doing another show in, 4 or whatever, 6, depending on kind of where you ended that last prep, I think would be a good idea to do that.
Right. Yeah, 100% agree. It's like, again, it's like, well, you can, and heck, I mean, for that matter, I would say there's probably a lot of newer competitors that their first few shows they do better just by virtue of getting in better shape. You
Yes.
know what I mean? Like just like getting in better condition, even if they didn't necessarily gain that much muscle, you
Mhm.
know? And hell, half the time they do their second show and they're lighter than their first show. Like they weigh less. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because
Oh,
they just get in a lot better shape. I get that sometimes and they're like, I weighed whatever and I don't know. I 100, female, I weighed 112 pounds and then, she weighs a little bit more now. I said, well, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to weigh 112 pounds. I've said you could have, like you easily had 6 or 8 more pounds that we could have pulled off of you to like actually get, like actually win the show or whatever. Right. So, that's a great point. Depends what the feedback is, I think, but that's for all competitors. I think, it's like, there's no point in just continuing to compete if the things you need to improve require you to not compete.
yes. And
You
really, a
know?
lot of people, every year, and they have similar placings than what they did the previous show. And really, at that point, you have to ask yourself, what am I trying to do here? If I'm competing just to compete, then keep on doing it. But if you're trying to, make improvements, make it engage hard, muscle, metabolism, whatever needs to happen for that to work.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, and that's a conversation that we can have with a client, maybe, and it might even be a conversation that I would just kind of bring it up a little bit before the first one. It's like, hey, we could maybe do a second one. I think we could maybe get you a little bit tighter, and you
Yeah,
might do a little bit better. Like I may bring that up, or again, like it's the opposite, and they just need to grow, and they just don't have enough muscle. And I'm like, hey, did good. You got in shape. You experienced it. Let's go do what we need to do to improve.
exactly.
Type of thing. I think that's yeah, perfect. All right, let's do one more. We'll take one more question here. How do you handle clients or other competitors comparing plans? Example, gets one gets more calories and less cardio than another and thinks something's wrong with him. Oh goodness. Oh, I'll tell you this right now. There is because people connect with people on social media, especially if you've never done it before, they're going to be talking to people and whatever. Just because, and especially if you have a coach, just because your coach doesn't have you doing it doesn't mean it's wrong. Like, there's a reason. You know what I mean? Like, just because someone else's coach has them doing something that you're not doing or vice versa does not have any indication that your coach is doing something wrong.
Exactly. And really, what definitely I've learned, obviously, there's so many ways to get a bodybuilder lean. One way is not necessarily wrong. There's just other ways and different ways of doing things. You might take step A, B, and C. I might go A, D, G. But either way, we're probably we're still going to get there. So I think that if you're with your coach and you found someone that you trust, obviously you always ask questions about your plan, about why we're doing this and what's going to happen when we do this. But at the end of the day, I think it comes down to trusting your coach. And if I'm comparing my plan with my friend's plan, I'm sure we are different. We have different body types. We have different, hormone issues going on or no hormone issues. So there's just so many differences between each athlete. It's hard to say, why is she doing this, and I'm
Right.
not, and she's leaner, you know?
Yeah. and people just don't, it's all context, right? It's all context. So you go to that first show and maybe your coach is, and I've had this, I'm sure you've had it. You're online and there's the local coach there that has the 20 people in the show. And then they're like, hey, I bet you I could do better. Let me see what you were doing with your plan. Like, oh, I would have had you do this instead. Like, whatever. I'm like,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean shit. Or oh, you weren't eating enough or whatever. I'm like, you have zero idea what transpired within that prep or this person's body or anything. So you're 120% right. It's just that you have to, if you're going to prep, I mean, hell, if you're going to hire a coach in general for anything, there just has to be buy-in. Like, don't even, otherwise, what's the
Why,
point?
yeah, why are you with them?
Right. It's just not, it's going to be too much of this pushback.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
100%. Sweet. So we'll cut it there for now. I mean, there's so many things we could probably, my God, we could probably talk about this for hours, but I really appreciate you coming on. I will reshare this and tag you and
Okay.
stuff so everyone can rewatch it if they want. And awesome. That was really helpful. I think a lot of people really, really enjoyed that. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great rest of your night.
Yep.
Bye-bye.